Hi, Pete staff. I am sorry that I can't be with you at the faculty meeting today. I did not want to prolong more of our debrief for the suicide prevention and postvention module. Part of what we wanted to do, our goal as counselors, is to be able to inform you guys more specifics about how we deal with self-harm and suicidal ideation on our end, but also give you some tips to help you should students disclose and appear at risk in conversations with you. So in kind of going through this quickly, and you can always refer back to it, starting out with counseling procedures for suicidal ideation. If we are made aware of the ideation either by a teacher because something a student disclosed to you, something a friend of a student disclosed to us, or maybe a student self discloses their own ideation, if we're aware of it, we assess the student for risk as soon as possible that school day. Sometimes we'll initiate that conversation with a scale of 1 to 10. You know, if 1 was, I'm going to end my life, and 10 was the best day of my life, we try to see on a scale where they would put themselves. That helps us to kind of have them rate themselves. We also, and I will talk about this more about why we ask that question, but we want to make sure that if they do say that they are suicidal or that they do have plans to end their life, we ask if they have a plan to carry that out. So that we know we can either disable that plan and we know if they're in imminent danger, if they've already thought through the means that they would do that. How often, how long they've been feeling this way, how quickly do they descend to a lower number if we choose to do the rating scale. If a student is assessed to be in imminent danger to themselves, maybe they say they're 1, maybe they say I have extra pills at home I know how to access, something like that. We do call parents, whether low or high risk, but we call parents as mandatory reporters and inform them of the situation. Depending on the intensity, frequency, duration of those factors, we advise them to take the child to the emergency room. Again, if even the risk factors are low, we still encourage parents to contact current medical providers for a recommendation to a mental health care provider, to a counselor. As mandatory reporters, we do need to let parents know that day. More times than not, it happens by phone. We call the parent at times. A parent will also come in and we discuss in person. Since that decision is out of the student's hand, because we are mandatory reporters, I do try to give them the option of which parent is contacted first, and if they want to tell the parent with me there, or if they prefer I tell the parent with them in my office, or they can sit outside while I discuss with the parent initially. If they can at least have some control in choosing that option, it helps them feel that they have a sense of control in the situation of how we at least initiate the conversation and with who. Looking at this next slide here, for more procedures and follow-up, if a student is hospitalized, maybe they were at high risk, they're held for usually 3 days, possibly longer. Sometimes that's in Waterloo at either Allen or Mercy One. If they have beds available, sometimes it can be up in Mason City. Sometimes we've had a student even across the border in Minnesota, the state border. Sometimes we hear from the hospital, and I would say more often in times we do not. We attempt to follow up with the parents that same day or right away the following day if it was our advisement or encouragement to take their student. Upon their return to school, we want to follow up with the students and parents, potentially request a lease of information from the parents, allowing us to communicate with their counseling provider if they have one outside of school. We want to ensure that there is follow-up with mental health care moving forward. Depending on the situation, with parent approval, we do let appropriate staff know, such as principal, teachers, nurse, and also upon return back to a class schedule, we sit down with the student and have a safety plan established, which could include, adult escorts for a time being, no bathroom breaks during class time where they would be on their own, regular checks in with the school counselor, or a referral from us to our school-based mental health counselor. Also, continuing on with procedures and follow-up, if safety is at risk, and despite more than one attempt to communicate with the parent, the child does not receive necessary care. So maybe we have had the child disclose to us a few times that they are still feeling suicidal, and we have told the parent every time and communicated, and the parent still does not take them to the emergency room. It is likely that we will call DHS and notify them for denial of critical care. There are times when situations escalate at night or on the weekend and we're not made aware of it. Sometimes you guys will overhear discussions like that, and that's why we want you to let us know immediately. With confidentiality, sometimes families do not want us to communicate the situation with staff, and we must honor that request. A lot of you understand that, and we appreciate it. We try to encourage them to let us inform staff so that they can support the student and be sensitive to the situation. But ultimately, it is the family's right not to share that info. And even sometimes families are so private that they don't even share that with people need to know here. So like counselors, maybe administrators. If a student indicates to you that they're not feeling well emotionally, you need to let us know as soon as possible, especially if they indicate suicidal ideation. This cannot wait and needs to be communicated to a counselor or principal immediately. I think you guys are really good with that. We've worked with you guys in the past for those student concerns. If a student has the connection with you and that is why they are disclosing the emotional hardships or suicidal thoughts, our suicide training module alone clarified that it is always imperative to ask the question, with the feelings that you've been having in the events recently, some students feel like, have feelings of wanting to end their life. Are you having feelings of wanting to end your life? Have you had thoughts on suicide? Something to that manner. You can start the conversation and then bring them down to us in the counseling office, or you can just let us know and we will have that whole dialogue and ask that question. All high school staff and secondary counselors were trained in one model, QPR, question, persuade, refer. And even that training, again, confirmed that it's always important to ask the question if there's a if there's a concern. It's a priority to ask the question. Research, again, shows, and the module taught us this, that research, or that asking the student if they feel suicidal or mentioning the word suicide, it does not, in fact, give them the idea to. The question to ask, again, is kind of what I said earlier. Are you having thoughts to end your life? Are you having suicidal thoughts? That would be a way to directly ask. The question to not ask is, you're not feeling suicidal, are you? That kind of implies a quick answer of, no, I'm not. Also not asking, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you? That would be another question not to ask based on our training. For self-harm and suicide, self-harm is not always necessarily indicative of suicidal ideation, but it's definitely a mental health warning sign and needs to be communicated to counselors immediately. Again, you guys have done a great job with this in the past. We meet with the student, assess the situation, call parents as mandatory reporters and make them aware of the situation because students are harming themselves. Suggest counseling if they're not already receiving counseling within maybe here at the school-based or outside. If they're not receiving counseling outside, we do want to make referrals, or if they are seeing one, have a release of information so that we can collaborate between counselors. We always want to follow up with the student, prepare a safety plan, work with the current provider to implement the plan. And if safety is at risk and despite more than one attempt to communicate with the parent again and they don't receive care, then DHS might be notified for, again, denial of critical care. And hopefully that's worst case scenario. We really don't want it to get to that point. Now I want to give you guys some tips about, again, what that dialogue looks like step by step. As K-12 counselors, we are, and all of our K-12 counselors will be trained in this model. The PAL model stands for the Pathway for Assisting Life. Basically has 3 phases. This is a great way to think about kind of that dialogue between a student at risk from beginning to end. And again, a lot of you have built those strong connections with kids that they might disclose some of these risk factors to you, that this would hopefully give you a direction on how to kind of start that dialogue, or at least then bring them down to us, and then you know what we're doing as part of that dialogue. So the first phase of the PAL model is connecting with suicide. So basically we're communicating, I care about you, that person at risk. So the first step is we explore stressful events with feelings of loss and other risk factors. Risk factors that could include actions of self-harming, reckless behavior, withdrawal. It include feelings of desperation, worthlessness, and hopelessness. Physical factors could be a lack of interest in appearance, disturbed sleep. Lastly, statements such as, no one can do anything to help me now, or I just can't take it anymore, I'm a burden to everyone. These are all risk factors, all signs of distress that invite help. Accept these invitations, if you will. Follow your gut, explore the meaning of things you are seeing and hearing from that student. And then asking the question. Reasons to ask directly about suicide, you want to know the answer. Says you don't think badly of them if you're asking directly. clearly says that suicide needs to be addressed when you ask the question. And again, it does not give them the idea, but if all the risk factors are leading to that, it's so appropriate to ask the question. Moving into the second phase, understanding choices. This phase kind of communicates, I understand, as the caring, the person who cares, who's helping them. So the first part of this phase is to really hear their story. Give them the time to tell their story, ask what led to these feelings or led to them to this place currently. Paraphrase what you're hearing them say. It sounds like you are feeling hopeless because, or I hear you say, kind of a sentence stem there. The person hurting has to come up with their own turning point. This is the last step in this phase of the model. The turning point could be that they don't want to die anymore after talking. So they're kind of rejecting the idea of suicide, or they can actually hope for something like talking to a particular person. They might be uncertain about choices, and that uncertainty leaves an opening for hope. Finally, they might be at least willing to try something and focus on steps to keep them safe for now. And that is the key phrase of this model, keep them safe for now. Example, if you think about, they kind of told us the life chair and the death chair. That's kind of the two voices that would be in a person at risk's head. And if you were trying to give them the turning point, you have so much to live for, you're so great at basketball, what would your younger sister do? You're trying to give them that turning point, then you're kind of sitting in that life chair voice, and they only have room to sit in the death chair. Well, they'd probably be better off without me. I'm really not that good at basketball. So you really have to let them have their mind be able to sit in both chairs, if you will, and be able to think of those turning points from themselves, because they have to think of it, believe it, and want to act on it. And again, we just want to keep them safe for now. So we don't want to give them the ideas. We want to see if there's anyone that they still have hope that they want to talk to, that they feel safe with, that they could share and help make connections of how to make that conversation or the action step possible. That's part of the turning point. They need to see those strengths in themselves, not hear you tell them. Also, we don't want to encourage the turning point to be living because they mean a lot to others, or because that just instills guilt. How would your sister feel if you ended your life? And that really just kind of provides guilt. It doesn't provide insight of like, oh yes, I should live. Going to that third phase of the model is the assisting life. And so that's us communicating, I'll help. So we've gone through, I care, I understand, I'll help. So the first one is developing a safety plan. You've heard me say that earlier in this kind of short presentation about how we're going to create a safety plan. And we need to, in that safety plan, consider if there's been prior suicide behavior, mental health concerns, substance use, if they, and have actionable steps that start now with keeping them safe. And usually the first part of the safety plan is contacting a parent if they're at risk to hurting themselves. And then confirm actions. We want to identify the most important part of the safety plan and the first steps needed to achieve it. And even we want them to kind of verbalize the action steps so that they are kind of telling themselves what the plan is. It allows them to verbalize the parts of the plan and have the first step be their choice in some ways. And usually that first step is tied to the turning point. Our first step is going to be to have that conversation with your dad. And then that's kind of tied to part of what the turning point was, maybe reconnecting with someone important to them. For us with junior high kids, it does always usually start with contacting the parent, but giving the student at risk a choice in how they find out and move forward with keeping them safe for now is a good way to start that too. So if you have any questions, you guys are always able to ask us down in the counseling office. But I want to give you a little bit of insight of how we follow up and go through those conversations, those really hard conversations with kids, but also give you kind of this very simple, applicable model that hopefully can help you as you might have to navigate some of those conversations should you choose as the caring person in it, but also working with students who might be at risk. So thank you.